Tonight on the Wrestling with Legends podcast, Dave Sullivan. Alright, on the line now, you guys all know him as Dave Sullivan. Welcome to the show, my friend. How are you today?
Good, thank you, Vince. How are you?
Pretty good, thank you. You know, before we really get to all the questions about your career, I wanted to give you a chance right off the bat here. As somebody myself who has, several published books, I truly understand it's a labor of love, it's a passion to write a book. So I wanted to ask you about yours, Meet Dave Sullivan. What's it about, and how have the book sales been going so far for you?
Been good so far. Surprised. What was the first question?
That's okay. Basically, what's the book about? What can people expect to learn?
I went from football to wrestling and all that stuff, and my times in wrestling, WCW and all that and everything, but just kind of that, and then growing up and everything with the football dad and all that stuff.
Let me ask you about that. For your body, right? So, how did wrestling in college and playing football in college both, kind of prepare you for, eventual a sport of professional wrestling? Because it takes such a toll on your body. How playing sports, amateur-wise, get you ready for that?
Well, I'll tell you what, wrestling especially helped you because you understood when you got in the ring with the veterans what they're trying to do a little bit to you. You know what I'm saying? Because you at least had wrestle amateurly, and when it teach you how the work really is. How you're supposed to sell it and all that stuff. So they put the holds on you, so you understood it. But being an ex-wrestler, that kind of helped that. Understanding what they were trying to do, because when you're wrestling amateur, you're not trying to submit them, but you're trying to pin them, and you learn a lot of the basic moves that that you can't use in amateur wrestling that you use in professional wrestling, because it's a different game. So that helped me a lot, and football did too. The contact, the physicalness, because when you're doing professional wrestling, it's more than just wrestling. You're outside the ring, you're running into things, you're getting slammed on tables, which. It's like getting knocked on your butt in football. It's the same dang thing. So, the difference is you got pads on in football.
Yeah.
But still, your body goes through it, and the shock factor on your body's hard on it.
I can't even imagine. I mean, I've told people, jump up and down for 20 straight minutes and just feel that pressure on your body, on your feet, and your joints as all you're doing is jumping up and down, right? Let alone somebody
Right.
picking you up and slamming you and tackling you and everything else. I completely understand that. After spending time in the world of football, including a stint in the USFL, which ironically enough, when they came back a few years ago, we had covered them vividly, the USFL. I thought it was really cool that they came back, but regardless of that, why did you decide then, okay, I'm done with this, I'm going to try professional wrestling? I read something once where you had met Harley Race, you were really impressed by his driving, and you decided you wanted to wrestle with him too.
He kind of got me started because Bob Geigel and Grappler trained me. And so, I'm meeting Harley on the road because I was out at a football game, and his son was a pretty good wide receiver for Blue Valley, and just met him there, talked to him, and he told me who to get a hold of and how to start. Because at that time he was ahead of the Kansas, what was it called back then? That it was him and Geigel kind of ran it because he was on the road still wrestling a lot. And what the heck was it called? Central States Wrestling, that was out of Kansas City and ran through St. Louis and all that in parts of Kansas.
Yes.
Because you had the AWA in this area, which came to Omaha, but you go south, it was Harley's territory because he had Beatrice. It was kind of a weird line. He'd run Lincoln once in a while, and AWA didn't. It was Central State something, and I was down at Washburn University at that time in Topeka, Kansas, as the offensive coordinator, and so I ran into him, and we just got to talking. So I started going over there and getting trained by him, and then Grappler went up to Portland as the booker, and then so I got some work with Grappler. Then I ended up going up there with him eventually and getting out of football. I don't know. I mean, I tell you what happened when I was at St. Cloud State, and I was assistant coach. I was at UNO as a graduate assistant. I went up there with Noel Martin to St. Cloud State, and I was up there, and we hosted because we had a pretty nice indoor arena that seated about 7,000. With wrestling, it was probably around about 750 to 800. And they did a show there, the AWA, and the Giant came in, and Jesse was there, Ken Patera was there, a lot of the greats of the AWA at that time, the Bees with Greg Gagne and gosh dang, what was his name, Jim Brunzel, Jumpin' Jim. And so I met them all, and because we were in charge of the security that night, the football team, and so we got to meet them all, and I just kind of started I mean, I always liked it as a kid, but then I kind of really said, this might be something I can do. And that's when it first kind of hit me. Then I ended up getting an offensive coordinator job down there at Washburn, and then I met Harley out the airport, and when I met his son, I got to talk to him, and got started in the business. He got me kind of going in it.
That's incredible.
And you respected Harley. There was nobody. There might have been some people's tough, like Haku was tough and Giant, but nobody was tougher than Harley. You know what I'm saying? Nobody messed with Harley. He was, I mean, he slammed the Giant way before Hulk did outside in the damn on the concrete. And I'm sure you've heard that story, Flair telling it, because Flair was there that night. And he goes, "What the hell did you do? Get Andre to do a slam on the concrete?" I called it, kid. And that's Harley. I called it, kid. And Andre had so much respect for Harley, he did it.
Man, that's incredible. And it's amazing because a lot of stories like that don't exist anymore, and especially with the territories being what they are. They've all more or less eliminated them, right? So it just...
Well, now you got all your independents, and if they ever got smart, that's what they should look at doing, is becoming territories, because there is no competition for AWA only works once a week, and then you got the WWF who's still traveling, but not as much as they used to. So, these independents ought to form some kind of alliance and work together, and they probably could build because a lot of these independents drop pretty good.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I couldn't agree more. I've been saying that for years. And, at least in this area of Ohio, one of the more popular ones runs on Friday nights, once a month on a Friday night. And it might work 9 months out of the year, but 3 months out of the year, they're not going to draw anything because that's high school football night. So, but,
right.
Intelligent thinking would avoid that. Right. Here's a question for you, though. I've been dying to ask you, and I'm willing to bet not a lot of people have ever asked you this, but I find it to be incredible. You wrestled matches, I believe, right, in Japan, the United Kingdom, and Puerto Rico. To me, those are three incredible fan bases. What was it like to wrestle in front of international crowds like that?
Well, Japan, there is incredible. And then also, I wrestled up and down Germany and Austria with Otto Bonds for 2 years, too. So, I did that, too. And they were great fans. And it's a different, Japan's different than here. It's a little more, you got to lay it in. But they only bring you in for 10 to 13 days, and then you're out of there. But they pay you really good for those 10 to 13 days. And again, I don't know if you could go longer than 13 days because your body, you come back to America, it's sore.
Yeah.
And it takes a week or so to get back into it because, it's work. And Germany's a little stiffer, not as stiff as Japan, but it was stiff too. But we did it like a dang tournament. And, it was kind of fun doing it that way because we stayed in one town for like so many days, and we'd do a whole tournament, and then we'd look at BS at the end. And usually, Otto would wrestle probably somebody like, gosh dang it, they're all gone now, gosh dang it, big guy, Van Vader, who's big in Japan too. And so they do, and it would just, those fans were nuts. They throw beer at us. Puerto Rico was probably the craziest because they throw more than just beer at us. They throw rocks and bottles, and especially in the baseball stadiums.
Yeah, passionate. It's just...
you'd cover your head. Dick Murdoch and I, we'd run out there and we'd go, here we go, man. protect thyself. But yeah, in Germany, they throw beer on you and stuff, but that's okay. The beer over there is awesome.
No, that's great. So here's one for you, and this is basically when I started following your career. So we're gonna go back to like early '90s, '92, '93ish. Okay, after spending early moments in the WCW as the Equalizer, which I remember you being the Equalizer, they eventually changed your gimmick to Dave Sullivan, aka Evad, the brother of Kevin Sullivan. How did that come about, and what was he like to work with?
Kevin?
Yes.
Yeah, I love Kevin. He was like my other brother. he really is a good friend and a good guy, and I enjoyed him. It was him. I was going along as the Equalizer, and I was doing fine, and then Bischoff called me, and we're going to bring Kevin in as a booker, and they also wanted to, and his idea was to get with me, and so it was pretty much Kevin's idea, and then Bischoff called me and said, "Are you good with it?" And I said, "Yeah, let's give it a go and see how it works."
Well, let me ask you this then, because this is something that, gets mixed reviews. It ended up being a tremendous move for the WCW, Ted Turner and Eric Bischoff. WCW began to bring in big names, and we're going to get a little bit more extended into that question here in a second. But before I do, the biggest was Hulk Hogan, and they instantly put you in a not a feud with him, but you're teaming with him, you're going on Saturday, or not Saturday night's main event, my God. You're going on Clash of the Champions with Sting and Hulk Hogan. You're in this major storyline. What was that like? 'Cause that had to have been a pretty big jump.
Oh, it was. It was. I mean, it really, and it was. And I guess when they did that Hulkamaniac, because I never looked at the points, I didn't know how to. They would come and tell me that your favorability is really growing. It's right up there with Hogan and Sting. So they decided to do this together, and it was kind of Kevin's brainchild to put these other guys in there with them, the Dungeon of Doom, and so I got a chance to be with two of the most famous wrestlers at that time with Hogan and Sting. So it was exciting. I mean, I enjoyed it. I can't say nothing bad about it. It was an opportunity that you every once in a while in life you get something brushed your way and you get it, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, and you absolutely did. So my next question is pretty long. It's a longer question, so I appreciate your patience, and hopefully I don't stumble all over my words here. Starting with Halloween Havoc 1994, a show in which you worked on. Going into Starrcade 1994, WCW began to spotlight brand new guys from the WWF, and there was a ton of them. I'm just going to name a few. All of a sudden, there was Jim Duggan, Honky Tonk Man, Queen Sherry, Earthquake, Brutus Beefcake, Big Boss Man, Macho Man. All these guys, I mean, even a guy like Mr. T was on that card on Starrcade 94, which is just crazy to think. You have all these guys who had just come over from the WWE. How is that absorbed by guys like yourself and other guys who had been with WCW for a couple of years through some of those leaner years that all of a sudden these guys are there and they're getting the top spots on the card? Was there a resentment or was there appreciation towards getting a bigger name on the card?
For me, it wasn't a big deal because I got to work with a lot of them, Duggan and all of them too, and work against Honky Tonk. So it was good for me. But I kind of think that's what drove Austin out, to be honest with you, because then they just didn't think they need on. And I don't think, again, you have to look at this, okay? Mm-hmm. You can say what you want about Vince McMahon. I mean, he's a hell of a promoter. He is. I mean, he beat the territories. I mean, and did it by taking their guys and doing it that way. But I'm just saying, compared to anybody else in that business, he's an unbelievable promoter. And he knew how to use people. We had Steve Austin there, and no ideas were thought on how to use him. He goes there and he becomes 316, and he's bigger than lightning. He's bigger than shit.
Yep.
And I mean, and that's what Vince. And then he took other people from there too. And Hunter Helmsley. He was just Hunter Helmsley there with us, working with Steve Regal and those guys. He goes up there and he becomes Triple H, and how big he became. So I'm just saying is, I think we brought all those guys in, and I loved working with them because I respected them, and I watched them a lot, and it helped. It was good for my career because I worked with Macho Man and all those guys. But it affected those guys that were trying to get up on top at that time, like a Stunning Steve and Triple H, and I think, and also it hurt. Gosh dang, his bang, and he left too, and that hurt his push. Cactus Jack at the time.
Oh yeah.
So all them guys that were kind of, if they did it right, were probably going to make the WCW great without bringing all those guys in. Because the reason why Vince let them go, you got to be honest with them, they weren't drawing what they used to draw.
No, they're all older.
Vince is a smart businessman. Otherwise, he doesn't go.
Yeah. You look at Mark Mero, who was Wildman, or Johnny B. Bad, Mankind, Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin. All those guys were already on that roster and jumped from WCW.
And that's who affected. Those names you just named, when they brought in all those WWF guys at the time, because it was WWF, when they brought those guys in, that's who it affected. Those guys right there, and they vamoosed, and they basically whipped Hogan and those guys and took over and drove WCW to bankruptcy to where they had to sell it. Cat had enough. We're selling it.
That's exactly what happened.
And I mean, nothing against them, but they'd already been run through once. And that's where I think Bischoff, if he looks back, that's where he made a mistake. And then giving Hogan creative control was not good either.
No, and we'll talk about that in a quick second, of the Hogan creative control. But before we get there, I want to ask you this too. I mean, one of the most respected names in the business for a long time, and to this day, is Diamond Dallas Page. I mean, right. Like I said, I think I might have told you off air before I hit record here, me being 42 years old, I look at it now and I say to myself, my God, that guy didn't even start his career until his late 30s, early 40s, and it's just amazing what he did. I'm just curious, what was it like to work with him? Because as far as a TV persona goes, he's almost impossible not to like.
No, I mean we hung out a lot together, and we worked together a lot. I mean, in practice and kinds of stuff. And so I mean, yeah, he's a good guy, and it shows what a good-hearted guy he is. How he's tried to help these other people that are down on their luck, and because wrestling's a tough sport. If you don't save your money when you're on top, I mean that story that Mickey Rourke isn't far off to a lot of guys.
No, I mean, just to take you behind the scenes here, it's we've done this now, where we've had professional athletes on the show and professional wrestlers and MMA fighters as well. And I'll just put it out there, and this is not to embarrass anybody because I'm not going to say any names, but nobody charges us any money. That's not the way this works. Like, we're here to promote you and help you, right? But quite a few times, I'd say maybe half a dozen, we have paid a professional wrestler a few bucks because they've come to us and said, listen, I'm desperate, I don't have any money, this is my situation because of everything you just said. You know what I mean? And it's a matter of there's no health insurance during those days. And, maybe a couple of surgeries, like anything could happen, right?
Right. And here's the whole thing is just to the body really tried to get that going. And if they all would have worked with him that night instead of walking away, and Hogan, and they come out in the thing that Hogan smashed it. But he hurt everybody when he did that. And in the end, he hurt himself because he lost a lot of money, his kids in second divorce, and he didn't have anything built up. That's why he's still doing the stuff he's doing, if you look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got himself redone. He's got his restaurant. He did that. There for a break after the divorce, he was scrambling.
Well, yeah. I mean, look at TNA.
Because remember, he went back to the TNT wasn't calling and started working again, and his body didn't need that because it was already had surgeries on it.
No.
And the poor guy, he had no choice.
Well, him and Ric Flair both. You look at a guy like Ric Flair still working into his 70s, and it's like you just gotta pray to God that guy doesn't die in the ring. I mean, it's just insane. So I totally understand it.
I mean, and that's because he spent all his money, didn't pay his taxes. So, but again, if you like what Jesse said, like at the end, all your professional. We're the only professional sports league that doesn't have any insurance. Nothing. And that's any kind of retirement thing, anything. We're the only ones. And all you like the guys because they didn't force the issue. And they had a chance back then, and Jesse had them, and you've heard the story. He had them convinced, and then Hogan wouldn't do it, so the rest of the guys didn't do it, so it went to fault.
Yep. I mean, it's, before I got into the world of sports media, I worked in a grocery store, and one of the biggest things we had there was a union. You knew you were getting a raise every 6 months, you knew you had health insurance, you knew you were guaranteed a set number of hours every week that you were going to work, and then you knew if you went over those hours, it was going to be time and a half paid. It's just one of those things where a lot of people might slam unions, but in certain situations like my own, again, before I got into sports media, that was a big deal for me. So, maybe save that for a different show, but it's just how I feel. So I've
unions first were created. They were created for a good reason, for equal pay and all those things like that. And it was important for America at that time, because otherwise guys would get screwed over just like they did in wrestling. And that's what. And I mean, sometimes they do some illegal shit too. I agree with you, but overall, if they're handled right, unions are for the people and to help you.
Well said.
And I mean, just like going. I mean, Hogan not only he messed the boy, but he hurt himself too. That was not a good because if you really want to hold people liable, that's what you do. You put that in writing and you get it done. And when you're the money that Vince has made off that damn thing, think about it. He sold it for $20 billion. Okay, all right. And so it's one of the largest professional. It's right. It's not as big as football, of course, but I mean it's up there with the other ones, right? And they don't have a union. Are you kidding me?
Oh, it's insane.
This game made $20 billion, and you don't have a union.
Oh, and it was just bought out by the UFC and Endeavor and everything, like you said. So it's not even gonna. I mean, now you really could forget it.
Yeah. Because he has both MMA and they don't have a union either. They're the other ones. MMA and both WWE do not have unions.
They treat those guys like crap. I mean, I know I've had so many UFC fighters on my show, and they have all said the same thing. not only is there's zero health benefits, there's zero travel. They don't fly those guys anywhere, and it's like you got to pay for your hotel, your flight, your doctors, your everything. And then if they want to go see a fight and they're not on the card, they have to buy a ticket. That's got to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard of in my life. I can't even imagine, you're a champion for the UFC and you want to go see, somebody that you might have to fight in a couple months, and you got to buy a ticket to sit in the crowd. That's ridiculous.
It is. No, I didn't know they had that, but hell, they got it worse than we do in wrestling. Shoot.
Oh, it's crap.
But now the same guy owns them both, so, it's going to be interesting to see. Because, they should form a union together for the wrestlers and those guys to protect themselves in the future. Otherwise, Mickey O'Rourke played that part, but it's not far off from a lot of guys.
No. Yeah, not at all. So I know we've kind of sidebarred here, or sidebarred, I apologize. But I do have 2 more questions for you here. One of them's kind of a layup. Yeah, actually, it's a pretty darn easy question. But, so when you were there, there's a rabbit, right? And you got Kamala. You have so many over-the-top, Mickey Mouse kind of characters. And I'm not calling yours Mickey Mouse. I'm just saying there were gimmicks there that were so outrageous, right? So you flip the switch, and you get to the NWO in late 1996. How big was that for the business? What a change.
Oh, it was. It did. It got. Those 2 guys came in, and they came in at the right time because they were big at Vince, and then they came to WCW, and then it popped big. And then they moved Hogan to heel, and it really popped. It did. It got over big time. It did. It was fun. And we were beating Vince at the time. The problem is, and it still comes back, is you got Hogan with creative control, right? And you don't have any baby faces other than Sting really over at that time. So I think it eventually drove the people away somehow. Because at the end of their run, they weren't as big and there was too many guys in it.
Yeah, it killed it. It absolutely killed it. But it was a massive hit while I was there. So my last question...
Yeah. And you hear Bischoff talk, he'll tell you too. That's what killed it. We stayed with it too long.
Oh my gosh, no doubt about it. So my last question for you is very unique. In the aspect of... I have met with and interviewed, I don't know, I'm going to say a couple hundred professional wrestlers, and anybody who was with WCW during this time of the question I'm about to ask, I've asked this question to. Now, with the exception of maybe yourself and Nick Patrick, maybe even Bret Hart, there's not many people who were a part of this situation who could really talk about it. Now, I know you were gone by this point, but we mentioned it earlier. You worked with Sting, and you worked with Hollywood Hulk Hogan. You also mentioned how Hulk Hogan had creative control. So I'm going to take you back to a night, and if you don't remember it, it's okay, but it was Starrcade 1997, and that NWO build had been there for 18 months, and for 18 months, Sting didn't wrestle, and the entire build was for Sting to overcome Hulk Hogan and defeat the NWO at that year's Starrcade 1997.
Correct.
It ended up not happening.
No.
Really screwy finish.
Hogan called it off. And he talked Bischoff into it too.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know. That's. I think Bischoff knows, and I think he's talked about it sometimes on his radio show, his podcast. But yeah, it was Hogan. Hogan put the squash on it.
Let me ask you this. So, Bischoff. Okay, I've spoken with him, not on air, but I met him once and we had a conversation, and now he's actually gone on record a few times. One of the very, very few reasons he's ever said is that Sting showed up out of shape and looked like he had a drug problem going on, almost like he was hungover. Again, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to.
Said, it doesn't, unless Sting was going through a divorce, I don't see Sting doing that.
Yeah. It's bizarre.
It was time, and then when they didn't do it, that probably hurt him.
Oh, there's no probably about it.
If you ask, because Kevin Nash will talk honestly about it, if you ask him and Bischoff, they'll probably admit that not doing that with Sting that night probably hurt us in the long run, now that you look back.
Oh, for sure. I think that and Kevin Nash with the finger poke of doom, Rey Mysterio having to remove his mask. They were just some really hokey decisions.
That sunk him, yeah.
But, that one there to me, as a fan at the time, being 16 years old, that is when, and listen, I'm not going to insult you or anybody else. like one of the very first questions I said, it takes a toll on your body, right? Like, wrestling to me is not fake. I hate when people call it fake. It drives me nuts. But it is predetermined. Anybody in their right mind is going to be able to tell you that, and I don't mean that as an insult in any way, shape, or form.
No, it's true. I'm not. It's kayfabe that now anymore. It doesn't work.
Right, but even at but even at 16 years old, okay, I want the good guy to win, and I'm sitting there watching that and that was the first time again where I said to myself, I don't want to do this. Is just insulting. You know what I mean? Like, usually you turn off your TV and you're either happy or sad about the end of a match or a storyline or whatever. But that was the first time in my lifetime as a wrestling fan where I turned off the TV and I'm like, I feel insulted. I'm like, this is total BS. Like,
I think a lot of people did that night. I think a lot of people. That's when you noticed the heat. They didn't have as much heat, and they didn't. And there was no baby faces popular.
Nope. You killed three. You killed Sting and Bret Hart in one shot, in one night, because you made Bret Hart look a complete moron coming into the ring and saying, hey, that was a fast count, when we're all sitting there saying, no, it wasn't. He just lost, right? And then you have Sting, have to win, and we're all sitting there again like, you just lost. So, yeah, it's just a terrible way to go about things. But honestly, like I said, we brought you on here tonight. Final question for you here. I really do want you to go ahead and plug that book. How could fans of Keon Sports follow you and support you and buy your book? How do we get a hold of it?
You go right on to Amazon.com, okay, and look and just put in the words "Meet Dave Sullivan." It'll come up, and just order from there. And if I'm in town near you or I'm at a show, come by and I'll be happy to sign it for you.
You still coaching football? I have to ask. You still coaching football anywhere?
I am I'm coaching offensive line this year at Millard West and D-line at the 9th grade level. It's something I love to do, working with young people.
Can I ask you a high school football question?
Yeah.
How do you motivate those offensive linemen?
You know what? They do a pretty good. You just keep them. You got to keep them going and keep them up because they can get down on themselves because they're big old boys. So you just work with them on being positive and keep them tough.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I've always said that. I mean, we Keon Sports here, we got our start covering high school football. That's kind of the biggest thing we do is high school football. And I've always said, how much appreciation I have for the offensive linemen because the only time they get their names called is when they have a penalty, either holding or offsides or false starts. So.
That's true. That's true. It's more of internal things with offensive linemen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly.
Well, hey, we wanted to thank you again. We're going to wish you the best, and good luck with the book.
Thank you, brother, and good luck with your stuff, too. Thank you so much, Vincent.
Have a good night.
You too, buddy.
So that was Dave Sullivan from WCW Lore. Great to have him on the show tonight. Kind of ironic, him being in the world of professional sports with professional wrestling and high school football, and us here at Keon Sports having that high school football connection as well. So again, we want to thank Mr. Sullivan for coming on the show. I am Vince McKee. We're going to wish everybody a good night. Take care.